Hi, I'm Luke Stokes, I'm 19 and this is my Unit 6 Sport and Exercise Psychology. A little bit about me before we start. I play rugby, football and cricket, all types of sports, so I can relate to everything throughout this. First, we start with the introduction, and sports and exercise psychology is an expanding field, both academically and professionally. Personality can play such a major part in sport and it can affect the whole team. There are team members whose aggression is what motivates them and other players around them, but continue to turmoil and fractions within teams. Injuries, mindset and psychology can play a major part in teams and individual performances. My aim of this is to give an idea of what affects personality and motivation on physical and organised sporting activity. I'll be looking at understanding the impact of arousal, stress and anxiety on sports performance. Finally, I'll identify and discuss 4 different factors which contribute to the psychological or group dynamics, and 3 factors that affect people in exercise environments. The contents are introduction, aim, personality and motivation in sport, understanding the impact of arousal, stress and anxiety, psychological of group dynamics and psychological factors that affect people. Here's a diagram in personality and motivation in sport, and as you can see, the 3 common factors are the coach, the performer and the sports performance. I'm going to talk about 3 different personalities. Start with David Beckham. He has the personality of a winner, won many trophies, started his own academy for younger children to play, and he's worldwide known. Jonny Wilkinson, again, started his own academy, came from nothing, played at Farnham, big player for England, captained them, won the World Cup in 2003. And Ben Stokes, a player who lasted a whole cricket game to even have to go into extra time for a cricket game and had the motivation to stay in and make sure England won the Cricket World Cup final. Characteristics of the performer. Personality, everyone has a different personality. Big personality, small personality, and they all come and affect different ways in sport. Competition, everyone wants to win, everyone's determined to win. Genetics, some people are bigger, some people are smaller, and it depends on what sport you play, on how well your genetics are for the sport. Psychological skills is how well you want to train compared to one person. One person could be lazy and the other person could be not lazy and want to train all the time. Injuries, everyone has injuries. Injuries can affect you for a long time and not a long time. Injuries overcome and they happen in all types of sports. Personality. Personality is defined as the combination of characteristics that form an individual's distinctive character. There are several theories that propose to explain the construction of personality. The first would be trait theory, which involves introverts, extroverts, type A and type B. The second is social learning theory. The third is Martin's schematic view and the interactional approach. 1. Traits. The trait theory is that people have the characteristics that decide how they behave and how they perform in non-sporting and sporting environments. The trait theory also says that there are 2 types of people, and these are introverts and extroverts. Introverts and extroverts will also show how they behave in a non-sporting and sporting environment. I'm now going to go on to talk about the 2 types of A and B. Type A. Type A lacks patience, strives for competition, high desire to achieve goals, always rushes and multitasks. A sporting example for this would be a rugby player. All these would relate to a rugby player. They lack patience, they want to be quick playing the game, they strive for competition, they want to win competitions, high desire to achieve goals, that's by winning trophies and playing in international, and always rushes and multitask. Rugby players will be playing quick, fast, and trying to do many different things at once. Type B. Type Bs are tolerant, relaxed, low levels of anxiety, high levels of imagination and creativity. A sporting example for this would be a creative midfielder in football. They're tolerant, they're relaxed, and the high levels of imagination, putting balls through and creating different types of balls in the football game. Introverts and extroverts. Introverts are usually quiet and shy and don't look for adventure and excitement. They prefer a calm environment, and a good sport for an introvert is golf, as they like to play sports by themselves. They don't like or want to be the centre of attention. They also need time alone to recharge and reflect. They are seen as quite reserved from an outside perspective. Whereas extroverts are like the complete opposite. They're confident and allowed and like to be the centre of attention. A good sport for someone who is an extrovert is rugby or American football, as they like to play up to the crowd. In American football, Odell Beckham, he likes to be the centre of attention like extroverts do. Also, extroverts have a low pain tolerance. They prefer to play with a group than solo. Extroverts tend to think out loud and make quick decisions. Social learning theory. This suggests that our personality is not a stable characteristic and it constantly changes due to variations in social situations. It suggests that we are highly unlikely to behave in the same way when we are in a sporting situation and a non-sporting situation. This includes the people we are around and socialise with on both occasions. Furthermore, it suggests that in sporting situations we learn through an environment, experiences and through the influence of other people. It also suggests that in a sporting situation we learn through two different ways: modelling and reinforcement. Modelling. Modelling means that the individual is likely to model him, herself on the people he or she can relate to, such as those in the same sport or the same gender. It basically says that when we look up to an individual, we copy their actions. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is important because if an individual's behaviour is reinforced or rewarded, it is likely the behaviour will be repeated. You need to have a high attention to retain skill. Motor responses and motivation skills must be high too. Motivation is having the urge to complete something. You can become more motivated by setting yourself a target. This makes you want to complete it. Factors that may affect motivation are time, friends, transport, environment, no support, physical condition, mental prep, sleep, diet, school and work, and relationships. An example of setting a goal and motivation is a rugby player saying they want to score 10 to 15 tries a season. This makes them want to get into positions better to score tries, making the team more motivated and setting themselves a goal and an end target. Extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is a motivation that is caused by reward. There are 3 examples of this: praise, money, and fame. Intrinsic motivation is because you enjoy what you do. 3 examples of this are it's enjoyable, interesting, and satisfying. The Maslow theory. The Maslow theory describes motivation as the way of satisfying needs that are needed for long-term development. The way an individual acts at a certain moment is usually figured out by his strongest need. Maslow claimed that a person will be most motivated when their needs are completed. This begins from the most basic needs and moves to more complex needs. As you can see on the chart that Maslow created, self-fulfillment is self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. Esteem needs, which is in a psychological needs. Prestige and feeling of accomplishment. Belongingness and love needs, intimate relationship, friends. And in the basic needs are security needs, security and safety. And the psychological needs, food, water, warmth and rest. Aggression. Aggression is a characteristic that can have many negatives as well as positive effects on performance. Aggression can be defined as any form of behaviour directed towards the goal of harming or injuring another life being who is motivated to avoid such treatment. Most people view aggression as a negative psychological characteristic. However, some sport psychologists agree that aggression can improve performance. Aggression in sport, it can be where a player will play within the rules of the sport at very high intensity, but no intent to hurt the opposition. Sport stresses. Aggression results from frustration because of losing, not playing well, being hurt, or unfairness. Boxing is very aggressive with no intent to injure the person, as it's played at very high intensity. Also, aggression could be caused because the referee is bad and they've made a bad decision which is unfair. Personality is just one thing that makes up a player. There's so many more things to it. Sport stresses allow us to understand what causes an athlete to become frustrated, which can lead to aggression and, importantly, a decline in performance. As I said, if a referee makes a poor decision or you get injured. 1. The characteristics of social environment. Support. The support players have from their family, their friends, their coaches, the fans who support them and make them more driven and motivated. The development of a player, the development through a game, how much you can become a better player when you're playing. And like, for example, Ben Stokes, he developed further and further and gained the team more motivation to win the World Cup. And environmental, a cricket game, if it's raining, it's cancelled. If it's snowing, it's cancelled. If you wanted to be a snowboarder, you can't really do it in England. You need to go abroad and do it. So environmental can affect the way you play sports and the personality of sports. Training and practice, strength and conditioning. You need to be strong and you need to be conditioned to play in sport in 2020. Nutrition. Nutrition is so important. They even have people doing nutrition, people working for the nutrition and helping the nutrition better when you're a player. The demand of games. Just last week there was 3 Premier League games in 7 days. The amount of demand over Christmas for a Premier League player. Recovery relates to demand. I mean, if you're not recovering enough while you're playing, the demand of all these high intense games, you're going to get an injury. And the balance of social life, family life and work life, and they all relate to each other. Arousal, stress and anxiety on sports performance. Here I've got a picture defining arousal, stress and anxiety. We've got trait anxiety, state, and that's got arousal, state anxiety, cognitive state anxiety and somatic state anxiety. Anxiety and arousal. Anxiety is often thought as an emotion, whereas arousal is thought as something that occurs as a result of psychological or physiological influences. Both anxiety and arousal are not only present but important in competitive sport, and they are in all sorts of sports. Proper mental preparation for sport should involve regulation of both anxiety and arousal, as it can greatly improve your performance. Some examples of this are when a player is lining up in a tunnel, they'll feel their stomach and they'll have butterflies just before they play. This is because they're anxious, they're nervous, they're not sure what's going to come out of the game, and they're not sure how their opponent's going to be. Arousal can be, you can feel aroused when you're playing sport. The more aroused you are, the worse you play. But if you're mid-arousal, the better you play. Low arousal, again, worse you play. So low and high arousal will decrease your performance, but mid-arousal will boost your sports performance. Arousal. Sports performers and athletes react and cope differently with arousal by either positive or negative emotions such as excitement or fear. Before a game you feel excited to get involved, but you also are scared for the outcome. Arousal may be caused by either positive or negative emotions. It changes your blood flow, changes your hormone levels, and it makes you into a different sort of sense. Before the game, you feel your stomach turning and you know you're nervous, but as soon as you make that first tackle, you're into the game, the anxiety is gone, and you've got a mid-level arousal, which is a perfect playing performance. Arousal types. The drive theory. This theory says, as arousal levels increase, the performance level increases as well. Arousal levels are better maintained by pro athletes than normal athletes. An example is when a football player takes a penalty in a game, it'll be performed better than when practicing penalties in training. The inverted U theory. The inverted U theory says performance is better when at mid-arousal levels and worse when too high or too low, caused by over or under arousal. An example, when a top-tier team plays a lower team in a top team, feels under-aroused due to the difference in ability. The catastrophe theory. When arousal reaches max, the performance drops. An example in sports with rounds. The first 2 rounds are good and great and the arousal is at mid-level, but the last round, when your arousal reaches max, your performance will drop. Anxiety. There are 2 types of anxiety, trait or state anxiety. Anxiety may be defined as a perceived threat or something that is about to happen. It can be that feeling just before the whistle blows or the bell rings. People suffer with anxiety every day in normal life and sport, but in sport, when you're anxious, it can really put you off your game. You can not feel like the same player until you get into the game, and then the anxiety goes, and then you're playing properly. State anxiety. State anxiety is when it changes over time, so it's only temporary. It would be prior to a match because of the imminent of situation. Prior to a match, you're walking in the tunnel, you're waiting to play, or you're in a changing room, you feel a bit sick, but you're not actually feeling sick, you're just nervous or anxious. I've got a direct quote from Spielberg, 1972 to 1983. A transactory emotional state or condition of the human organism that is characterized by subjective, consciously perceived feelings of tension and apprehension, and heightened autonomic nervous system. Trait anxiety. Trait anxiety is a stable position that an athlete or performance usually has a personality trait. For example, any player who's going to take a goal kick or a throw in or a penalty kick has the thing they do before, whether it's looking up and down at the posts or making their eyes on a player and not going that way, just so they know how they feel. I've got another direct quote from Spielberger, 1972 to 1983. Trait anxiety denotes relatively stable individual differences in anxiety proneness and refers to a general tendency to respond with anxiety to perceived threats in the environment. Stress has been identified as crucial in sport, influence performance as well as social functioning. This is quoted by Jones and Harding in 1990. An ability to manage stress in sport can cause performance difficulties or can even increase performance. The study of stress has developed research into combining this within each individual athlete. Stress can arise from internal and external factors. External factors can be stuff like drinking, alcohol problems, drug problems, marriages, social life, not being able to keep up with the sport, or just too much on your mind to be able to play in a sporting environment properly. Internal stress can be such things like injury, illness, mental health problems, and even if you think you've had a bad game, it can ruin the rest of your week thinking, did I do well enough? Did I play well enough? Here I have a diagram of stress and the way stress can affect your performance. As you can see, too much stress can lead to exhaustion, and then the perfect amount of stress can lead to a little bit of fatigue. But if you're too little stressed, you can become laid back, inactive, and not even want to play sport. And too much stress causes breakdown, anxiety, panic, and anger. And anxiety is what can affect you the most, as I've just talked about how much anxiety can affect your performance. The 4 different factors which contribute to the psychological of group dynamic. Group dynamics is in every sporting team in the world. It is where a group will come together with personalities and interact and build stronger relationships, causing them to be more successful. The team will need to work on this with group bonding skills. There are 4 stages to this. Stage 1, the discussing the next stages to be able to get an idea. Stage 2 is called the storming stage, is where the group will start to have differences between them. Stage 3, the norming stage. This is where the team will actually begin to start seeing what they have in common and can identify a common goal together. The final stage, which is known as the performing stage. This is only possible if the team goes through the 3 stages of 4 and does them all perfectly. All the stages together is what makes a team, and this is what is able to perform successfully, and that is from Sindhu in 2020. Karen's conceptual model of cohesion. As you can see here, I've got a diagram which tells you all the factors, the environmental factors. Like I said earlier, you can't snowboard in England because there's no snow, and if it's raining too much, you can't play cricket. There's the personal factors, which is if you're injured, you're sick, too much anxiety, too much stress, you can't play. The leadership factors, the behaviour of the leadership, if you're not a leader, if you want to be a leader, if you feel like the leader isn't good enough. The team factors, the group task, if you can complete it together, if you get on with all your teammates, and if you can actually bond as a team. And for example, using the 4 stages to build the actual team. There's the cohesion, the task cohesion, and the social cohesion. And the group outcomes, how stable the team actually is, how well the team plays together, the chemistry and the bond of the team. And the individual outcomes, how you think you played, how well your behaviour is in the game, and how satisfied you are with your performance. Social loafing. Individual feels uncomfortable, unconfident players, not part of the team, performance decreases. Social loafing. When a performer doesn't feel confident or comfortable to play to their full ability because the players they play with are better than them, this forces them to feel not part of the team, their performance will decrease. The Ringelmann theory. Performance changes due to group size, easier to bond, players hide, and mental motivational loss. Performance change due to the group sizes. It's easier to bond within a small group during sport and socially. Players will hide due to the group increases and bigger characters coming in. This can affect performance and have long-term effects. Mental motivational loss. For example, in football, if a new striker gets bought, then the other striker lacks and loses any motivation. For example, during lockdown, grassroots sports clubs like football and rugby clubs have had poor income, which has affected these clubs being able to offer training and games, because these have a positive effect on people's motivation and energy. This has also affected the club's ability to buy more equipment. The dynamics of the game can change so quickly, from an injury to a red card to the other team starting to fight, as everyone's getting involved and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. For example, in athletics, 2 strikes, you're out. All that training you've done and you just lost it from accidentally getting 2 strikes. The 3 psychological factors that affect people in exercise environments. There are many different reasons why people stop exercising. The 3 main factors of this are determinants of exercise adherence, barriers to exercise, and the behaviour change models. Determinants of exercise adherence. This is where people stop doing exercise and they don't know what they're trying to achieve from it. This could be because they're new to it, or they only just started it as their friends started it. It could also be because they don't like their coach, they can't get there, they don't like the people there, and they're just struggling to find a motivation to play. Ways to avoid this would be by setting goals. So setting a goal, I want to be scoring 5 goals a season, 10 goals a season. So as you go on, you can progressively make your goals better. This will help because they don't know what they're trying to achieve, and it will increase their motivation. The psychological factors. Barriers to exercise can include lack of time, friends or family don't share your interest in physical activity, or you don't like anyone who you're doing physical activity with. The lack of motivation or energy. Without motivation, you don't want to play. Without energy, you don't want to play. And these 2 could be because you've got more important stuff like family or work or education. The lack of resources or equipment. If you can't afford to get there, then this is going to prevent you from playing. If you don't have the boots, you don't have the equipment to play, then you're not going to be able to play. This is a major part of the factors of not being able to play sport. People not being able to afford it, or not having the right family to even get them to play sport. Thanks for listening. I hope you've understood my sport and exercise psychology. The bit that I actually found most interesting was about personality and how personality can affect the way you play sport so massively.